Hello and welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day. Today I want to continue to talk about evolution and creation, God, atheism. And I want to talk about two irreconcilable differences that I have with evolution. My two biggest problems with it. So this is coming from someone who was raised as a Christian. I am still a Christian. But I have several times in my life really done kind of a deep search into evolution, trying to understand what it taught, what it teaches, what it's about, where it came from. And I have learned some things, and I have realized I was wrong about some things. My opinions have changed, and they continue to change to a degree. Things I don't completely know what I believe yet. But there's two problems I have with evolution. And nothing I've ever read, whether it was a book, whether it was on a website, or whether it was something I watched, like a debate or a YouTube video or whatever the case, I've never been convinced of these two things. Number one, the evolutionary process, material evolution, is infallible and unquestionable, as if to say, signed, sealed, delivered, it's been proven, the story's over, it's scientific fact. That's not true. And I'll go into that here in a second. And the second thing I've never been convinced of is that there is no faith in evolution. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But both of those things are very hot button topics, or they're very offensive to your evolution. It's like, I could probably have not said two more offensive things because they absolutely, militantly, vehemently disagree with me on those two things. So let me just give a couple of definitions first. When I say faith, I don't mean faith as a religion, a faith. I don't mean specifically faith in God. I mean, it's a belief that requires faith. That's what I'm saying. As in, you don't have all the knowledge, all the answers, there are gaps there, and you're just filling in the gaps with faith. And then let me just throw out a few more things about a semantical argument. Every time I make a video like this, a lot of the objections are definitions. I didn't use a word correctly, or I'm not understanding something. Hopefully you get my point. So getting into a semantical argument is not, it's not what we should be doing. If I say theory, because I'm going to probably say that many times today, and you tell me that in science, theory means something different than what it does everywhere else in the world, okay, I understand that. I'm going to say macroevolution, and I understand that there's speciation, and that my definition of macroevolution is probably not maybe 100% correct, but you know what I'm saying, okay? When I say macroevolution, I'm talking about the neo-Darwinian, tree of life. Everything came from a common ancestor. That's what I'm talking about. So please don't see a word that I maybe defined slightly wrong or something like that. Let's just get past that. You understand what I'm trying to say. So let's just look at the bigger points here. Okay, I'll just try to make this as short and sweet as I possibly can. Evolution, the material evolution, whether you're talking about the origins of the universe, whether you're talking about, cosmology in physics, in mathematics, in biology, which is the main one, in paleontology, in chemistry, whatever field you're talking about, there's been lots of study, been lots of experiments and testing and actual science that's went on throughout the years. I'm not denying any of that. I'm not saying that the actual science was not science. But it has never came to the point where it's a complete, absolute, cut and dry fact, a law of science, that material evolution without God is 100% confirmed. It's not the case. Let me say something about science. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists say things. So science is infallible, right? If a test can be repeated over and over again, it's infallible. It can't be questioned. But conclusions that are made from scientists are fallible. So I'm not against science. I'm pro-science. I think if anyone was against science, that would be crazy. But people are involved, as in every other field of study in the world, and people are fallible. Okay, people get things wrong. There can even be a consensus among scientists that this is the case. That doesn't mean it's right. There's been many consensuses about something, and everyone just agreed this is how it is. This is what we believe. It turned out they were wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Better evidence came out, and they realized they were a little off. And now with new evidence, they can create a new theory, a new hypothesis, a new conclusion. That's okay. The problem I have is before that new evidence came out, they told you it was proven, it was a fact. In kids' textbooks in school, it's presented as if it's a fact, not as if it's a theory. On a special on television, it's presented as if it's a fact. It's not. It may be the consensus, okay? It may be what everyone thinks is the case. But don't present it as if it's infallible. It is not. When you're talking about people, you're talking about people that have agendas and biases, myself included. First of all, there's a presuppositional bias. People go into things already assuming certain things, and they view evidence with that presuppositional bias, and it also will affect the way they pursue certain leads. For instance, a material evolutionist will not even think for a second it's possible that God exists. There can't be supernatural. It has to be something natural. For something to be supernatural is a non-starter. God cannot be, okay? And so therefore, with that presuppositional bias, any evidence that starts to point toward an intelligent designer or something being created from a mind, they stop and they go a different direction because they feel like that can't be true, that cannot be the answer. They go a different direction. So they have a presuppositional bias. They assume something from the beginning, and that affects their conclusions. That affects the way they analyze information. There's also a confirmation bias, okay? They already know what they want to get. And as they research, they're already looking for the answer that they want. They want the answer to say something. I'm not saying they would hide information that would say something differently, but that is a bias. So whether it's a presuppositional bias or a confirmation bias, it could be conscious or unconscious. They might not even realize that they're doing it, but they have already assumed certain things cannot be true or can be true. And they've already, in their mind, decided this is what I want the information to say. I want to find something that confirms what I already believe. Okay? Third problem is that they live in an echo chamber. This is where that consensus comes in. They find evidence. It seems to support what they believe. It seems to lead them in a direction, and so they tend to make a conclusion. You know? Now, there's people that have a different conclusion. It's not that science said anything. It's that the interpretation of that science is different. The conclusion drawn from the facts can be different. But generally speaking, everyone that they're around, everyone that they're friends with, everyone that they listen to or read have the same viewpoint. And so they live in an echo chamber. And the longer that they live in that echo chamber, okay, the more that what they believe becomes not something they believe, but something that's factual. Theories become law, okay? the more and more and more you keep hearing and reconveying in your mind the same exact thing, and it never changes, the more you're convinced of it. And you live in that echo chamber, okay? And you never hear other points of view, because when you start to hear another point of view, you dismiss, you discredit, you discount, you will not listen to it. You make fun of that other point of view, you laugh at it. You will not even take the time to listen, because you have convinced yourself that something is the way it is, and that those people are crazy, uneducated, ignorant, whatever the case. You just won't listen to it. So you continue to live in that echo chamber. And then the fourth thing is we're intellectually dishonest with ourselves. We, scientists, all of us, can at times not admit to ourselves what's really happening. And we just are intellectually dishonest. We know that it's not proven. We know that it's not 100% guaranteed that what we're telling you is confirmed and true, but we tell you it is. We present it as if it is. And if you disagree with us, then you're against science. And if you disagree with us, then you're just a loony, right? That's being intellectually dishonest. That is not true. To say that material evolution from the origin of life all the way until this very moment has been completely explained, completely understood, and things like macroevolution, from a common ancestor has resulted in a tree of life to all the present forms of life on this planet. To say things like that is confirmed beyond any shadow of a doubt is ridiculous. Okay, that's being intellectually dishonest. And you know it is. Let me give you for instance. So when you talk about the fossil record is like taking a book and you realize that you're missing certain lines, you're missing certain phrases, actually you're missing certain pages, and then in some parts of the book you're missing entire chapters. It's an incomplete work, okay? There's huge gaps in this book that you don't have any clue as to what happened or what happened before it. Within the information you have, it's up for interpretation. Yes, there's a consensus, but a lot of people who aren't even Christians will see it differently, okay? Also, there's times where the information you're reading is not completely accurate. You think an entire fossil was found somewhere. When you actually figure out what was actually discovered, it might have been a tooth and a couple little bones somewhere, and they reconstructed the rest of the skeleton to what they think it looked like. Other times they'll find intact entire skeletons, and it's pretty clear what it looked like, okay? There's also questions about dating. It's not an exact science. Yes, there's a consensus on how old things are, but it's not an exact science. But when you look at the fossil record, it's an incomplete record, and it's full of gaps. It's up for interpretation. It's a subjective thing, okay? There are certain animal lineages and parts of that book that do tend to point toward evolution. There's also areas that point away from it or just have no knowledge at all. So it's up for interpretation. It's subjective. It is not set in stone, pun intended. Okay? But evolutionists will tell you, oh, it absolutely is. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that macroevolution is true. No, it doesn't. That's nonsense. I will just tell you now that in the field of homology, in DNA, there's a lot of research going on where people are trying to find common ancestry through DNA. And if that continues to present wealths of information, I could really see at some point them stopping to use the fossil record as often as a source of information and starting to move more toward DNA. If there was a huge breakthrough, which in their minds, based on the conclusion that they come up with, was more you know, provable. It was just bigger information that superseded the fossil record. And they had this new information, and they were so excited to tell everybody, see, we've always told you that evolution was true, and here's our new information. At that point, they'd be more honest about the fossil record, and they would say, well, there was a lot of gaps, and in reality, we couldn't prove, you know, everything we wanted to prove based on the fossil record. But now we have this new information, and it's actually more provable. They'd be more honest about it if they had something better to give you, okay? But since they don't have anything better at the moment, they're going to act like it's infallible, it's unquestionable, and it's completely scientific proof and law. That is not true. Another, for instance, somehow we could create a time machine. We could go 100 million years in the future, and we could document all these new life forms that had macro evolved from other life forms. And we took pictures and video and traced it all back, and then came back to our present time, and we had a wealth of knowledge to such a degree that nobody could even say, okay, macroevolution is not true. It would be such overwhelming evidence that everybody would have to admit it's true. If that happened, they'd be more honest about the information we have now, and they'd say, well, in the past, we theorized, and we had a hypothesis about macroevolution, and we felt like it was true based on the evidence we had, but we couldn't really prove it. But now we have proof. So currently, they're being intellectually dishonest about what they have. They're acting like it's signed, sealed, delivered, cut and dried, done. It's impossible to overturn it. That's nonsense. Once again, they would be more honest about it if they had new information. I wish people would just be more honest. I wish they would say, well, we know that microevolution is true. It's 100% confirmed. And we know that speciation, where, you know, two things microevolve to the point where they can't interbreed, happens. And I know that that's the definition of macroevolution. And we know that that has happened. But we can't actually tell you for sure that things like a four-legged animal turning into a whale happens. We believe it is. Here's the evidence of the fossil record, but we can't say for sure, of course. But that's what we believe. If that was the way it was presented, I would have no problems with it. But it's not. This is fact. This is proven. And if you disagree, then you're ignorant, you're unlearned, you're a moron, or you are just a fanatic. That's my number one problem with evolution. My number two problem with evolution is that they refuse to admit that there's faith involved. Okay? Let me explain. You've probably heard of the God of the gaps theory. This is a theory that evolutionists will use a lot of the time to point toward creationists or intellectual designers or theistic evolutionists, whatever the case. And they'll say, you guys are just using the God of the gaps theory. You have found a gap somewhere that no one can explain, and you're just putting God in that gap. And then those groups I just mentioned will vehemently say, no, we're not. The evidence leads to God, and it's not a God of the gaps theory. My actual opinion on that is that it kind of is. And I'm going to admit that today. I do believe in a God of the gaps. I don't disagree with what the creationists and everybody are saying, that the evidence in their minds leads toward the most credible possibility that there was an intelligent designer that lived outside of space and time, and he created the universe based on the evidence. I agree with that. But let's be honest, we can't prove that. It's not provable, okay? But I actually like the term God of the gaps, and I'm glad that evolutionists say it, because that, at least as an admission that there's gaps. There's gaps in the fossil record. There's plenty of mathematical and probability, things that are happening that cannot be explained, that it seems impossible for evolution to have done it. And you look at the irreducible complexity of a cell. How do you explain that, especially when it comes to the origin of life? Most scientists will agree that we don't have all the answers. We don't really know what happened. They can tell you that based on the way that the universe is expanding, if the speed of light has been constant this whole time, that maybe 13.8 billion years ago, that's when the universe started from a single point, okay? But they have no clue how that happened. I would say God did that, but they would say, oh, it can't be God, it can't be a supernatural thing. So we don't know how it happened. And then how, from that single point, we have, billions and billions of galaxies and stars, and this Earth, and from a one-celled common ancestor, all the life forms on the planet, that seems incredible, and that requires faith, okay? There are things we don't understand, and that is for everybody on this planet. There's things we absolutely just don't know. We're always learning. In the universe, our knowledge that's in our human brain is so minuscule and tiny compared to the knowledge that's out there. We're all learning, we're all gaining knowledge, and we're all discovering things. So there are gigantic gaps of knowledge and things we don't understand, and in all honesty, never can understand. So to say that there's gaps is true. And to say that creationists like myself fill in those gaps with God, I don't disagree with that. I'm not doing it out of convenience. I really believe it. But there's no question that I'm doing it. Okay? But you have to admit that material evolutionists are doing the same. They're filling in the gaps with material evolution. They say, oh, it's natural, it's not supernatural. Well, it's still miracles. For all that exists to have came from nothing into something, to unintelligently, without any intelligence or pre-planning, to all be as perfect as it is, for the universe to be as fine-tuned as it is, for this planet to be as fine-tuned as it is, for all the instincts in every animal and how everything survives, and all that to have happened by chance and randomness, that's a miracle. Maybe you think it's not a supernatural miracle, but that is, in my opinion, a much greater miracle. If that's what you believe, okay, but you're believing it by faith. Once again, I'm not saying you believe in God or it's a faith as a religion, but you're believing in something that you don't know for sure. That's called faith. So the bottom line is, I'll talk about myself as a creationist. Do I have a presuppositional bias? I do. Do I have a confirmation bias? I do. Do I live in an echo chamber, or have I lived in an echo chamber in the past? I sure have. Am I intellectually dishonest? No. Because I'm telling you, I'm admitting to you, I don't know for sure. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm telling you what I know is the truth. I'm telling you what I believe to be the truth. I'm telling you that I'm filling in those gaps with what I think is the case and with what I believe by faith. Okay, so I'm not intellectually dishonest. But see, if things like macroevolution are not completely proven, then what's an evolution stand on? It has to be proven, because if it's not proven, then it gives more credence to the theory of God, and they can't stand that. So they have to say it's proven. They have to say it's 100% set in stone. They have to, okay? They cannot even attempt to believe that there's a possibility that God exists. They can't do that. They don't want to do that, okay? So they pre-assume that he does not exist. They don't want that. That's the non-starter. That's what separates us and them. I will tell you that I believe in microevolution. I will tell you that I don't believe in macroevolution, but I will admit it's possible. It definitely is. It's definitely possible. Okay, that wouldn't change the fact that I believe in God. Okay, I have supporting evidence that I can present to you about the origins of the universe and about all life on this planet. And I think it all leads back to an intelligent designer. And then my personal opinion is that it's the Christian and Jewish God, the God of the Bible. That's what I believe, okay? I believe that by faith, but I have supporting evidence. But there's no difference in a material evolutionist. There's plenty of gaps that you don't understand. There's plenty of things that you're missing, and you're filling in those gaps, believing in miracles. You're just believing in a natural miracle. So to say that evolution is infallible and unquestionable is nonsense. And to say that you're not using faith is nonsense. Those two things, no one has ever been able to convince me otherwise. And if you'll be honest about that, you'll realize we're really on the same playing field. Once again, science doesn't say anything. We're all looking at the same science, we're just coming up with different conclusions, okay? Scientists say things, okay? You say things, I say things. So it really comes down to the way you perceive, the way you conclude, and what you believe by faith. So this video is not intended to upset anybody or to make anyone mad, but I just felt like it needed to be said. And I hope that people will really think about this and really let it soak in their hearts and in their minds. So I'll just stop here, but until next time, take care.